All right, how's everybody doing today? Hotep, hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer, and historian. So it is Thursday, September 9th, 2021, and we are live. So many of you have heard me talk about a 10-week online course that I teach on Saturdays. From the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. And we have a new session of this class starting up on Saturday, September 11th. It's going to be 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I wanted to do a brief overview, a brief preview of the class to deal with some of the content that we talk about. Okay. So, and we have this, you can register for the classes at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We'll talk about that. But this class is a 10-week online course, and we deal with history, about a little more than 100 years worth of history. And we deal with what happened after the Civil War ended. We start with 1865 and deal with some history leading up to the Civil War and why the Civil War was fought. And we go through and look at the Reconstruction Era, 1865 to 1877. We look at Special Field Order number 15, 40 acres and a mule. We look at the 13th Amendment of 1865, which legally ends slavery. And we go through and look at history, the Jim Crow era. We look at the World War I, World War II, Red Summer of 1919, and we look at what happened to us after slavery ended. What were the laws and policies put in place? And how do we get to where we are today? We go through and look at the Civil Rights Movement, Brown versus Board of Education, U.S. Supreme Court case, 1954. We look at the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Power movement that comes out of SNCC in 1966 through the Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Okay, so I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips, and so much of this information is so relevant to what's taking place right now. On my radio show, if you watch us here on Facebook, you know, we just talked about the statue of General Robert E. Lee that was taken down on in Richmond, Virginia on Wednesday, September 8th. That statue has been up 131 years. This article here from NBC News, Robert E. Lee statue in Richmond, Virginia, taken down, cut into pieces. And, you know, this is the legacy of the Civil War. Okay. And we know that those monuments were largely erected to terrorize African Americans and lock us into a low position in society. All right. So I want to do a brief overview of the content that we cover in the class. I'm going to post a link here. You can register for the class. The class is on sale now, $70, regularly $130. We have it on sale until Saturday, September 11th. It's on sale $70. We do the class live. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch it over and over again. Even after the 10-week online course is over with, you still have access to the class. You can go back and watch it. And we, if you visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, we have it right on the homepage of the website. And click on register here, and you can enroll in the class. And there's bonus lectures that you get from me as well. We'll talk about that. So if we look at the PowerPoint presentation, here's some information that we deal with in the class. If we look at the Civil War, okay, and so much of the conflicts that we're dealing with today, and a lot of the conflicts in these former Confederate states, Georgia, the voter suppression laws coming out of Georgia, Texas, Florida, different things like this. This is still a legacy of slavery, and we see these voter suppression tactics are going to be implemented after, largely after the ratification of the 15th Amendment in 1870. We're going to really see this escalate after Reconstruction ends in 1877. But if we look at the U.S. Civil War, 1861 to 1865, and we know that South Carolina is going to be the first state to secede from the Union. December 6th, December 20th, 1860. And this is 6 weeks after Abraham Lincoln becomes president-elect for the Republican Party, which was formed in 1854 by groups of abolitionists. All right. The Civil War in the United States it began in 1861 after decades of simmering tensions between northern and southern states over slavery, states' rights, westward expansion. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 caused 7 southern states to secede and form the Confederate States of America, the CSA, the Confederate States of America. 4 more states soon joined the CSA. Now, the war between the states, as the Civil War was also known, ended in Confederate surrender in 1865. So basically, April 9th, 1865, General Robert E. Lee, whose statue was just taken down, General Robert E. Lee surrenders to General Ulysses S. Grant at the Appomattox Courthouse. Okay. And we take you, each class we go through and break down this history. We go through and analyze an approximately 10-year period of history each class, so we get a better understanding of what happened, okay, and how we got to where we are today. And we're going to see the roles that laws and policies take place in a lot of these conflicts and a lot of the backlash that's taking place right now. We trace this to slavery and after the Civil War. Okay, so the war between the states, as the Civil War was also known, ended in Confederate surrender in 1865. Now, the conflict was the costliest and deadliest war ever fought on American soil, with some 620,000 of 2.4 million soldiers. 620,000 soldiers were killed out of 2.4 million that fought. Millions more were injured, and much of the South was left in ruin. And Reconstruction, you're dealing with reconstructing the South, and you're dealing with integrating these 3.9 million former slaves, integrating them into society as well. And what we're going to see is that the amount of investment that needed to be made into that effort to integrate them into society and give them some type of economic foundation, that not enough was invested in that. We're going to see that land that was given during for special field order number 15, 40 acres and a mule. We're going to see most of that land taken back. And one of the things we also focus on is the massacres that take place after the Civil War ends as well. And a lot of these massacres deal with trying to lock us out of political power. Also, not just economic power, but trying to lock us out of political power. Now, anytime I speak, I know I may say some things that people may have never heard before. Just because you disagree with it or don't like it does not mean it's not true. Just means you have to do some research to understand what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something that may be outside of the circumference of your own awareness. That's something I learned from one of my teachers, Dr. Ray Hagins of the African Village. Now, if we look at the Reconstruction era, and Reconstruction is 1865 to 1877, and we take you through the Reconstruction era, the Freedmen's, the Bureau of Freedmen Refugees and Abandoned Lands, the Freedmen's Bureau, which ends in 1872. It closes down in 1872. The Freedmen's Bank, which collapses in 1874. The presidential election of 1876. We take you through, go through a timeline of history. Each class we go through and look at a timeline of history, so we understand cause and effect. Okay, there's a class that I have right now taking place on Saturdays, and this one we're on class number 6. This past weekend we just talked about the Black Exodus of 1879. The Exodus of 1879 of African Americans leaving out of Texas and South Carolina and some of these southern states, going out west, going into Kansas. Okay. And in 1879, you have 6,000 African Americans that migrate from these southern states going into Kansas looking for a better way of life. It's known as the Exodus of 1879. It's also called the Black Exodus. of 1879 as well. How many people are familiar with the Exodus of 1879? Now, if we look at the Reconstruction era, for a 14-year period, the U.S. government took steps to try and integrate the nation's newly freed population into society. Okay. Between 1863 and 1877, the U.S. government undertook the task of integrating nearly 4 million formerly enslaved people into society after the Civil War bitterly divided the country over the issue of slavery. Now, you have idiots like Larry Elder, who's running for governor of California, black conservative talk show host, just a total jackass, who in a interview that Candace Owens, another idiot, did with him, he says that slaveholders should be given reparations because, like it or not, slavery was legal and their property was taken away from them. All right. Now, he didn't mention the fact that they were given their land back by President Andrew Johnson after Lincoln is assassinated and after Special Field Order number 15, approximately 400,000 acres of land, and we deal with 40 acres in the Mule, Special Field Order number 15, approximately 400,000 acres of land is going to be allocated, and it's going to go to 40,000 African-American families, but it's coastal land in South Carolina, Florida, and Georgia. Most of that land is going to be taken back and given back to the plantation owners, former slave owners, by President Andrew Johnson. And then also in April of 1862, President Lincoln signs off on the compensated Emancipation Act of 1862 that pays reparations to slaveholders in Washington, D.C. Not all slaveholders in the U.S., but just slaveholders in Washington, D.C. Okay. But what he didn't tell you is that the international transatlantic slave trade was outlawed by the U.S. government, and that law went into effect January 1st, 1808. And the international transatlantic slave trade is the process of bringing Africans into the U.S. to enslave them. That was outlawed January 1st, 1808. So all the Africans that were brought to this country from January 1st, 1808 to July of 1860, when the Clotilda comes into Alabama, all that was illegal based upon federal law. He didn't want to tell you that either. So they kept, these Europeans kept violating, these white people kept violating federal law, bringing Africans into this country. So these are the type of things that you find out when you study history. And we see most of these conflicts that are taking place today have a historical origin. All right. So, and this shapes laws and policies. People's understanding of history impacts the laws and policies they support and the politicians they support. It impacts what is taught in schools and the position that people take when it comes to systemic racism being taught in school and understanding white supremacy and the history of slavery and things like this. So this has a wide-ranging impact. How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also. I'm doing a brief preview of a new 10-week online course that I teach from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. And this is going to be on Saturdays, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It starts Saturday, September 11th. And it's going to be from 12 noon to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a 10-week online course. Let's see if we got that correct. Okay, let's continue here. You can register for this class at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have the information right on the homepage. We'll show that to you shortly here. And we'll post a link here again. You can register for the class also. Okay, let's continue. So when we look at Reconstruction, Between 1863 and 1877, the U.S. government undertook the task of integrating nearly 4 million formerly enslaved African people into society after the Civil War ends. A white slave-holding South that had built its economy and culture on slave labor. A white slave-holding South that had built its economy and culture on slave labor was now forced by its defeat in the Civil War that claimed 620,000 lives to change its economic. They had to change their economic, political, and social relations to African Americans. We're going to see a continuous backlash against this as well from former plantation owners, former slave owners, things like this. And eventually you're going to see some Republicans get tired of having to deal with the issue of the Negroes as well. We're going to see this also take place. So let's continue here. We talk about 40 acres and the Mule, special field order number 15. And what's interesting about this is that, one, it wasn't designed to be compensation for work that was already done as slaves. A lot of people think that it was compensation for work already done. No, there was a meeting that took place in January of 1865. General William T. Sherman, General William Tecumseh Sherman, met with some African American leaders, a lot of them African American ministers, things like this. And this is the last year of the Civil War. And he basically said, look, the war is coming to an end. The slaves are going to be freed. It's inevitable. Okay. Many of the northern states had already freed the slaves even before the Civil War started. And he asked them, what do your people need to be free? What do your people need to be independent, to be self-sufficient? They resoundingly said land. We need land. It wasn't designed to be compensation for work that was already done. It was designed to be a support system to give them land to be independent. So you didn't have all these former slaves walking around homeless, destitute, you know. And also, when you research this, and there's an article that Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. did for the root.com, and it's also on PBS's website, pbs.org. One of the things that you find out about 40 acres and a mule is that it was the land that was allocated. It was only supposed to be inhabited by African Americans. And we were supposed to be self-governing. It was supposed to be self-governing, like a nation within a nation. There's an article from pbs.org that I talk about in the class, and I've talked about in some of my lectures before. And it's, what is it called? It's 40 Acres and a Mule. Hold on, what is that? The Truth Behind 40 Acres and a Mule. That's what it is. The Truth Behind 40 Acres and a Mule. Hold on. Read this article here. This gives a better understanding of what took place. And also the mule is something that was added later, and it was to be loaned to us. The mule wasn't given to us, and it wasn't supposed to be for perpetuity. The mule was to be loaned to us as well, or to those, not us today, but to those Africans back then. So read this to get a better understanding of Special Field Order number 15. All right, let's continue here. So we go through and deal with that, exactly what it was. Special Field Order number 15. We talk about Juneteenth, June 19th, 1865 in Galveston, Texas, and deal with that history. There was an interesting, so Juneteenth has been made a federal holiday, and I've done, actually did a 2.5-hour lecture, June 16th, 2021, dealing with the real history of Juneteenth, because the Emancipation Proclamation did not free the enslaved Africans. It was a military strategy that Lincoln used. Lincoln was trying to bring the South back into the Union. The Civil War was not fought to end slavery. The Civil War was fought to bring the South back into the Union. Okay. And Lincoln issued the ultimatum to the Confederacy. He said that the initial Emancipation Proclamation was September 22nd, 1862. And it said that the slaves in territories of rebellion and states of rebellion were free. Okay, they were going to be free if those territories did not come back into the Union by January 1st, 1863. It said that the slaves in territories that stayed loyal to the Union, they were still slaves. So the African slaves in Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and Delaware, those border states, they were still slaves. This is why you have to read a lot of these documents. If you go to loc.gov, the Library of Congress website, loc.gov and congress.gov, and read, and also archives.gov. Go to loc.gov, Library of Congress website, and archives.gov, National Archives, and read the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay, you can see it's not what most of us have been taught that it was. So we deal with, with Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday. And I talked about this, and I was speaking at the Juneteenth Festival, the 3-day Juneteenth Festival in Atlanta around the time of Juneteenth. And I was doing a couple of presentations down there. And I talked about how the Juneteenth federal holiday is a powerful tool if we understand how to use it, because this forces into a national conversation a history that Republican controlled state legislatures are passing laws to suppress the teaching of this history, largely to suppress the teaching of the history of slavery, systemic racism, things like this. And if you look at, there was an article from the New York Times that came out. There were so many articles written about the history of Juneteenth, and some of the articles, that some of the information they got was wrong. Like they said, that was when slavery ended, or that was the how do they put it? The last of the slaves were freed, June 19th, 1865. Well, when you actually study the history of Juneteenth, you're going to find out that some slave owners in Texas kept their African slaves to the next year and kept the information away from them. It's suspected that maybe they did it to get an additional year's worth of work out of them, and on the farms and things like this, on the plantations, etc. And then we know that they're going to be Native American nations. They're going to keep slaves until 1866, 1867. And this is why you needed the Black Freeman Indian treaties of 1866 to free the slaves of the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians. That's something we deal with in the class as well, because what are known as the 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans, they all own African slaves also. The Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians, which ties into the history and the origins of Tulsa, Oklahoma, because Tulsa, Oklahoma was founded by Creek Indians around 1836, who get pushed off of their land in the southeastern United States because of the Indian Removal Act of 1830, signed by Donald Trump's favorite president, President Andrew Jackson, who was a white supremacist slave owner. And they all get pushed, and they go out west over 1,000 miles on what's known as the Trail of Tears, and they take the African slaves with them. So about a third of the people on the Trail of Tears were African people. And they go into Oklahoma. All 5 of them go into Oklahoma. Okay, and many of our ancestors are going to get land from those Black Freedmen Indian treaties. They're going to get land after the Civil War ends. And a lot of the early African American landowners in Tulsa, Oklahoma, got land from those treaties. So we deal with Juneteenth as well. We talk about the 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment. We deal with people like Sarah Rector. Sarah Rector was known as the richest Afro-American girl in the country. She became a millionaire. She was about 13 years old or 12 years old. Became a millionaire in 1913. And Sarah Rector's family was of her family had been owned by the Creek Indians. And they're going to get land because of those Black Freedmen Indian treaties and the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887, which is a redistribution of 138 million acres of land. And most of that land was supposed to go to Native Americans and Black Indians. And 2/3 of that land went to white people. It's one of the massive land giveaways that we largely got locked out of. That's after the Homestead Act of 1862 and the Southern Homestead Act of 1866. Okay, that's after that. It's about 270 million acres of land that's going to be given away from the Homestead Act of 1862. They gave away that land for over 100 years. All right. One source says the last allotment was given away in 1976. I have another source that says the last allotment was given away in 1988, 80 acres of land in Alaska. That's the Homestead Act of 1862. And we largely got locked out of that land. But this is Sarah Rector. It's a good article from face-to-faceafrica.com. And I do a lecture series called Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. And this is one of the people who I talk about in that lecture series. Sarah Rector was 12 years old when she became a millionaire. Oil was discovered on her land that she got because of the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887. Oil was discovered on her land. This is an article from face-to-faceafrica.com. Okay. This is not conspiracy theory, hocus pocus nonsense. This is real history. Okay. You see, this is why it's so important to understand this history that happened after slavery ended and during that Reconstruction era, during the after the Civil War, etc. Sarah Rector was born in Indian Territory, March 3rd, 1902. According to sources, she was considered colored, though not African American, but she was African American. They called her Afro-American after she oil was discovered on her land and she became a millionaire. But not only that, when you research Sarah Rector, she was so wealthy, white people wanted to reclassify her as white, as some Indians had been reclassified as white. She was so wealthy, white people wanted to reclassify her as white because white is a status. Okay. And if you look at and all you have to do is look at you can look at the 2020 and the 2010 US Census forms. And what you do is look at the racial classifications. Okay. Because like when you look at the 2010 US Census form, when you look at the racial classifications for white, it talks about people who originate in European countries, but it also talks about people who immigrate to the country or originate in the Middle East. So people like who immigrate from what are called Middle Eastern countries, coming from Saudi Arabia, different things like this. But then also it talks about people coming from North Africa, from Egypt, Libya, Algeria, things like this. They're classified as white by the federal government as well. And there's a landmark case dealing with this of Dr. Mustafa Hefny. Okay. And I've talked about Mustafa Hefny a number of times in some of my lectures. Mustafa Hefny is of Nubian ancestry, and he immigrated to the U.S. from Egypt in 1978. And let me try to pull this up here. 1978. He said that when he came through customs, when he came through immigration, he went through the immigration process. He said they gave him his papers And they told him, you are white now. You are white now. There was a article. Let me see if we can pull up the article from the Griot. There was one from the Griot. There was one from, yeah, let's look at this one here briefly. This is from September 4th, 2012, from the Griot. How's everybody doing? Those just tuning in, we're doing a brief overview of a new 10-week online course that I teach on Saturdays. Class number 1 starts up Saturday, September 11th. This is going to be from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. Let me see here. Can we close this? All right. Detroit immigrant fights to be classified as black. Detroit immigrant fights to be classified as black. And this talks about Mustafa Hefney, 61-year-old Detroit immigrant, has fought for over 30 years to be officially recognized as a black man. Mustafa Hefney has been trying to get his racial designation changed since he arrived in the United States from Egypt in 1978, and has even reached out to President Barack Obama for assistance. On the surface, it would seem obvious that Hefney is indeed black. He is brown skinned with curly hair, yet the U.S. government considers him to be white. The U.S. government considers him to be white, okay? There's been numerous articles written about him, articles here in Detroit. He said, let me see, do they have a picture of him in this? They got all these goddamn ads, but let me see something. Let me find another. Hold on just a second here. Just a second here. Pull up another one. Yeah, this one right here. This is an article that I've shown before. This one here is from BET. Hold on just a second. An Egyptian man's fight to be black. Mustafa Hefney. This is from September 13th, 2012. Okay. And CBS, local CBS station here in Detroit, did a story on him as well. He said the government interviewer said, "You are white." Mustafa Hefney, who is now 61 years old and living in Detroit, told his local CBS station, though he lived his entire life in Africa with dark skin and dark hair, when he finally came to the States, a bureaucrat decided to mark Hefney down as a white person on his official forms. That's because he came from Egypt. In Egypt, those North African countries, Egypt, Algeria, Libya, when people immigrate to the U.S., they're classified as white, regardless of how they look. And for the past 34 years, he's been fighting for his right to become a black man. Read the rest of this article. Okay, this deals with status, but it's on the U.S. Census form. And do they show? Okay, they don't show a picture of him. I mean, they show. Okay, hold on. I want you to see what he looks like. I don't know why they don't show a picture of him in the article. This is Mustafa Hefney right here. Hold on, let me see. There's some pictures of him right here. Okay, there we go. Yeah, we got it. Okay, he doesn't look white to me, but you know, he looks like a brother to me. But that's classification by the U.S. government. All right, which deals with status. Whole nother presentation. We'll check that out. All right, let's continue here. So yeah, white people that want to classify, yeah, Europeans that want to classify Sarah Richter as white also. Now, if we go back quickly here and look at this article from face-to-faceafrica.com dealing with Sarah Richter. This ties into the origins of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Black Wall Street. So she was, as the U.S. site As the site U.S. Slave explains, Sarah Rector and some 600 other black children were entitled to land allotments as the children of enslaved people belonging to the Creek Indian Nation, belonging to the Creek Indian Nation. Why was that? Well, let's look at this here. In 1866, the year after the Civil War ends, the Creek Nation signed a treaty with the United States government promising to emancipate their 16,000 African slaves and incorporate them into their nation as citizens entitled to, quote, equal interest in the soil and national funds, end quote. 2 decades later, the federally imposed Dawes Allotment Act of 1887, the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887, sparked the beginning of the total assimilation of the Indians of the so-called 5 civilized tribes and Native Americans by forcing them to live on individually owned lots of land instead of community as they had done for centuries, the site explains. Okay. Now, when we look at Sarah Rector, oil is going to be discovered, okay, by oil driller B.B. Jones finds a gusher on her land, bringing in 2,500 barrels. Okay, Sarah Rector began receiving an income of $300 per day. All right, and she's going to become a millionaire. Local newspaper, the Kansas City Star, publicized its headline, "Millions to a Negro Girl, Sarah Rector, 10-year-old, has income of $300 a day from oil." This is from September 1913. Okay, so read this here, but this is like some of the history that we deal with in the class. And what we do is you go through this history chronologically and look at movements of African Americans, formations of townships. When we look at Oklahoma, there were about 50 African American townships that took place in Oklahoma. So when we look at the formation of Tulsa and the Greenwood district, North Tulsa, where African Americans live, well, Greenwood district, the business district, starting at the intersection of Greenwood, Arch, and Pine, but North Tulsa is where African Americans were regulated to. And oil is going to be discovered in Tulsa, in Oklahoma in general. Oil is going to be discovered, and you're going to have many people going into Oklahoma for a better way of life and to make their way. And many of them are going to be African Americans. And one of the towns they go into is Tulsa for a better way of life, and they're fleeing from southern states going into Tulsa. All right, let's continue here. How's everybody doing? How you all like this type of information? Okay, so we take you through our history. We do it the Black Freeman Indian Treaties, 15th Amendment ratified 1870. Also, we deal with the Force Acts, the 4 Force Acts, including the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, which is still on the books and still being used now, because the lawsuit that was filed against Donald Trump and filed against Donald Trump and some other people for inciting the January 6th insurrection. They're using the Ku Klux Klan Act to do that. All right. And then also the Capitol Police just filed a lawsuit, the 7 Capitol Police. They just filed a lawsuit as well regarding the January 6th insurrection. And they're using the Ku Klux Klan Act also as the basis of their lawsuit, violation of the Ku Klux Klan Act. We talked about that on my show. If we look at here, we'll pull up this. Pull up this article here. Well, this is one from Yahoo News. They picked it up from Rolling Stone. Capitol police officers sue Trump for spreading election lies that led to Capitol attack. August 26, 2021. Capitol police officers sue Trump for spreading election lies that led to Capitol attack. 7 Capitol police officers have filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump, the traitor-in-chief, Benedict Donald, and others involved with spreading election lies that led to the attack on the Capitol. The suit filed Thursday in U.S. District Court, the District of Columbia, U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, names the Stop the Steal rally organizers and members of far-right extremist groups, including the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, as vicariously liable for the riot, claiming many defendants in this case planned, aided, and actively participated in that attack. All defendants are responsible for it. Now, when we go through and look at this here, the suit was filed by the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law on behalf of the Capitol Hill police officers. The lawsuit alleges that the defendants' actions violated the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, a law designed to allow the President of the United States to combat the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist organizations, that also protects against those who interfere with Congress official duties. It protected elected officials from having their official duties interrupted by white supremacist organizations who were threatening them, who were beating them up, who were killing them, things like this. Because this is what was happening in the 1870s. All right. And this is why that act had to be passed by Congress. So if we go back and look at this here, see, this is a law still on the book, even though the Supreme Court struck down part of the Ku Klux Klan Act. I think that was 1883 U.S. Supreme Court case, because the Civil Rights Act of 1875 was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court also around 1883 or so. But what were the force acts during Reconstruction? There were 4 force acts during Reconstruction. In U.S. history, the force acts were a series of 4 acts passed by Republican Reconstruction supporters in the Congress between May 31st, 1870 and May 1st, 1875 to protect the constitutional rights guaranteed to African Americans by the 14th and 15th Amendments. The major provisions of the acts authorize federal authorities to enforce penalties upon anyone interfering with the registration, voting, office holding, or jury service of African Americans. The registration, registering people to vote, actually voting, the attacks that were taking place on the voter polls. Or if you look and see what's taking place today, this is a repeat of what's taking place during Reconstruction and what happened after Reconstruction with a lot of these voter suppression laws that were passed, like the Mississippi State Convention of 1890, where they instituted the poll taxes and literacy tests. It was called the Mississippi Plan, and this became the model for a lot of the voter suppression laws that are going to be passed by South Carolina and Georgia, Alabama, these other former Confederate states that are doing the same thing today. All right. So the major provisions of the acts authorize federal authorities to enforce penalties upon anyone interfering with the registration of people to vote, actually voting, office holding. Okay, so elected officials holding office, engaging in their duties as office holders, because African Americans were being elected into public office, but also white Republicans were being attacked by these white domestic terrorists as well, or jury service of African Americans. These acts provided for federal election supervisors and empowered the President of the United States to use military forces to make summary arrests. So President Ulysses S. Grant, who General Robert E. Lee surrendered to end the Civil War. President Ulysses S. Grant, in October 1871, declared martial law in 9 counties in South Carolina to crack down on the Ku Klux Klan and other domestic terrorist organizations that were attacking African Americans, killing them, things like this, office holders and white Republicans, attacking white Republicans as well. This act and earlier statutes resulted in more than 5,000 indictments and 1,250 convictions throughout the South. In subsequent Supreme Court decisions, various sections of the acts were declared unconstitutional. Britannica.com has a good article dealing with the Force Acts. Okay, so you can check that out also. But we go through and deal with this in the online course. Okay, let's continue here. So this deals with the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. Now this is at history.house.gov. House.gov is the official website of the U.S. House of Representatives, and history.house.gov is the history section at house.gov. But they have a write-up on the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. The 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868, defined citizenship and guaranteed due process and equal protection of the law to all. Vigilante groups like the Ku Klux Klan, however, freely threaten African Americans and their white allies in the South and undermine the Republican Party's plan for Reconstruction. Republican Party's plan for Reconstruction. Now, some of the Republicans going to give up on Reconstruction because they conspired with the Democrats to remove the Union troops out of the South if Democrats let Rutherford B. Hayes become president after the 1876 presidential election, and neither Rutherford B. Hayes nor Samuel J. Tilden had enough electoral college votes to become president. That's known as the Compromise of 1877, which ends Reconstruction and allows the white supremacists in the South to take back full control of the South, okay, and fully impose white supremacy. The bill authorized the president to intervene in the former rebel states, the Confederacy, the traitors, that attempted to deny, quote, any person or any class of persons of the equal protection of the laws or of equal privileges or immunities under the laws, end quote. To take action against this newly defined federal crime, the president of the United States could suspend habeas corpus, deploy the U.S. military, or use other means as he may deem necessary. That's the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, which is still on the books and now still being used now. And it goes back to Reconstruction. We deal with the Freedmen's Bureau as well as the Freedmen's Bank, okay? And the Freedmen's Bureau was underfunded. Originally, it was supposed to be only for a year. This is the Bureau of Freedmen, Refugees, and Abandoned Lands, the U.S. Bureau of Freedmen, Refugees, and Abandoned Lands. And this was supposed to aid the newly freed African Americans, newly freed slaves, as well as aid destitute white people. Because there's a lot of white people who were destitute. They worked on farms, worked on plantations. They had nowhere to go either. They did not know where the next meal was coming from. How's everybody doing? We've got Gwen, Alvin, Rogers, just a few of the people. Just a few of the people watching. Lisa. You can visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for this 10-week online course that I teach on Saturdays. Class number 1 starts up Saturday, September 11th. It's going to be 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can watch from around the world. We do the classes live. All of the sessions are recorded. All sessions are recorded as well, and they're archived. You can go back and watch them anytime. The class is regularly $130. We have it on sale for $70 until Saturday, September 11th. You can register for it right now. Click right here, register here. As soon as you register, it takes you to the next page. As soon as you click on register here, it takes you to the next page. Click on enroll. As soon as you enroll, there's bonus content that you can start watching. You're going to get some bonus lectures from me. Also, you get the one that I just did in June, dealing with Juneteenth and the real history of Juneteenth. That's a 2.5-hour lecture. Also, you'll get a six title pack from me, a six title lecture pack from me called Black Migration 1619 to 2019. We go through and deal with a lot of history. We deal with Black migrations and that 400-year anniversary, dealing with August 20th, 1619 in Virginia. We deal with the Great Migration, 1915 and 1970, the Red Summer, 1919, Detroit Race Riot, 1943. Also, this one here, which deals with the ancient African presence in the Americas, including this land we call the United States of America, going back tens of thousands of years ago. And the Khoisan, who have the oldest DNA on the planet, come from Southern Africa. They were here in this land we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago. And these are some of the things that Dr. David Imhotep talks about in his book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. This book here, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. And this deals with the African presence in the Americas even before the people who we call Native Americans came into existence. I've interviewed Dr. David Imhotep a number of times as well. Okay, so you get 6 bonus lectures from me also. Okay, so that's at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for the class now. There's bonus content you can start watching. Then there's also another class that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And this class deals with thousands of years of history. We have this one, class number 1 starts at Sunday, September 12th, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay. And with this one here, this is on sale for regularly $130, on sale $70 until Sunday, September 12th. This one deals with thousands of years of history and deals with history leading up to the transatlantic slave trade. And the other class, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement, Black Power, 1865 to 1968, that class picks up where Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade leaves off. Because the Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade class, I've taught that class since 2017. There's just so much information. We take you through a timeline of history. We deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. There's just so much history. I can't get all that into 10 weeks, 10 sessions. Okay, so because I wanted to really focus in on this period of time from 1865 to 1968 and through the Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power movement, all that, I had to create this new class here to really, so each class we can go through and analyze an approximately 10-year period of history. Okay, and this helps us better understand what happened to us after slavery ended and how we got to where we are today. All right, so we'll post a link here. You can register for the class, and then also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for it there as well. Okay, let's continue. How's everybody doing? All right, how you doing, Gwen? Okay, I want to go back to this PowerPoint presentation here. So the Freedmen's Bureau is a deep history in itself. And what we're going to see is that a lot of people are going to get tired as we go through Reconstruction. A lot of people are going to get tired of dealing with the problem of the Negro. And some Republicans are going to get tired of dealing with the problem of the Negro and investing money and things like this into these programs, into the Freedmen's Bureau. So the Freedmen's Bureau, formerly known as the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, was created in 1865 by U.S. Congress, and passes Congress, to help millions of former African slaves, African-American slaves, and poor whites in the South in the aftermath of the U.S. Civil War. The Freedmen's Bureau provided food, housing, and medical aid. It established schools and offered legal assistance. It also attempted to settle former slaves on land confiscated or abandoned during the war. One of the things that the Freedmen's Bureau is going to do is going to help us negotiate labor contracts, because now we can work and get paid for it. And there were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. And after slavery ends, we're going to see labor unions start being formed. Okay, now we're going to see some smaller labor unions formed in like the 1840s, 1850s. But after slavery ends, you're going to see these large labor unions being formed. The National Labor Union in 1866, American Federation of Labor, like in the 1870s, is going to be formed. And a lot of these labor unions are a lot of them are formed to protect jobs for white men and white immigrants coming to this country, and lock African Americans out of a lot of these jobs we were doing for free during slavery. And this is something that if you saw the special broadcast I did on Labor Day, okay, Monday September 7th, Monday September 6th, Labor Day, and I did a 2.5-hour presentation dealing with the African American roots of Labor Day, and how the Labor Day came about because of the organized labor movement, and the and then you're going to have the Pullman worker strike of 1894. Okay, and it's going to be President Stephen Grover Cleveland that signs Labor Day into law as a national holiday. But the organized labor movement comes about because of the Industrial Revolution and a switch from a agricultural economy to an industrial economy, and the factories and the mills, and the production of goods, the mass production of goods, but also mass production of textiles and of clothing, etc. And we're going to see the Industrial Revolution begin in the 1790s in England, especially around Manchester, England. And the foundation of the Industrial Revolution was the production of cotton. And the majority of that cotton was produced by African slaves. So one thing, if you missed that presentation, you can go back and watch it on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. We go back in history and we look at the origins of the Industrial Revolution. And because of the Industrial Revolution and more people going to work in the factories, then that causes a need to organize the labor of these people working in factories, because they're working in unsafe conditions, unsanitary conditions. There's no 8-hour work day, 5-day work week, things like that. That doesn't exist. It's only because of the labor movement that we have things like that, the 8-hour work day. And then you didn't have child labor laws. Okay, you didn't have child labor laws like in the 1880s, 1890s, things like that. That's going to come about because of the labor movement. All right. Well, the need for organized labor comes about because of the Industrial Revolution. The foundation of the Industrial Revolution are largely cotton produced by African slaves. Okay. So the Freedmen's Bureau provided food, housing, and medical aid, established schools, and offered legal assistance. It also attempted to settle former slaves on land confiscated or abandoned during the war. However, the Bureau was prevented from fully carrying out its programs due to a shortage of funds. It wasn't properly funded, and a shortage of personnel, along with the policies of race and Reconstruction. So originally, it was only supposed to last a year. Like that was like all the time you needed to help former slaves who've been enslaved for 246 years, and you're going to give them a year's worth of assistance. And then they got extended for 2 years, and then it gets it, you know, it keeps going, and it ends in 1872. Like that was enough time. Okay. So we deal with things. We also talk about the Freedmen's Bank. Freedmen's Bank collapses in 1874. We lose $2.9 million worth of our deposits in the Freedmen's Bank. Frederick Douglass was later in the history of the Freedmen's Bank. He's going to be put in charge of the Freedmen's Bank. He invests thousands of dollars of his own money to try to shore up and prop up the Freedmen's Bank, but it collapses in 1874. We talk about things like the Colfax Massacre of 1873 in Louisiana, the Vicksburg Massacre, 1874 in Vicksburg, Mississippi. This one right here, a lot of these attacks, a lot of these massacres are going to sit around political violence and trying to intimidate African Americans to keep us from voting, trying to overturn our vote, trying to overthrow state governments or city governments, like the Wilmington Massacre in 1898. Opelousas Massacre, 1868 in Opelousas, Louisiana. But this one right here in Eufaula, Alabama, November 3rd, 1874, the White League attacks black voters. This is another domestic terrorist organization. It wasn't just the Ku Klux Klan. There's a number of them. On November 3rd, 1874, deadly election riots took place in Barber County, Alabama. The White League, a paramilitary group affiliated with the Democratic Party at the time. Today, those domestic terrorist organizations they vote for Republicans. The White League attacked African-American voters at the polls in Eufaula and Spring Hill, Alabama. 7 African-Americans were killed and 70 others wounded. More than 1,000 African-Americans were driven away from the voter polls due to the violence of the white supremacist group. You can read more about this at Zen Education Project. Zen Education Project has a piece on the White League attack in Eufaula, Alabama. Let me pull this up here. In 1874. Right here from the Zen Education Project. But we go through history and we go through it and look at all these things that happen. These laws and policies that were put in place, the migrations of people, these massacres that take place. Okay. This is from the Zen Education Project. November 3rd, 1874, White League attacks black voters. What were they afraid of? Why were they afraid of us voting? I still haven't been able to figure that out. The Vicksburg Massacre of 1874, that surrounded elected officials. Peter Crosby, who's formerly enslaved and a veteran of the Union Army, he was elected as sheriff there in Vicksburg, Mississippi. In this massacre, this Reconstruction Era massacre, is estimated between 75 to 300 African Americans were killed in this one, the Vicksburg Massacre in Vicksburg, Mississippi. We talk about the laws that were put in place to suppress the African American vote, and the Mississippi State Convention of 1890, where they said we are here to exclude the Negro, because African Americans were voting in Mississippi, and we made up the majority of the population in Mississippi. And we had already had the only African American U.S. senator for Mississippi. That was in 1870, Hiram Rhodes Revels. There has never been a U.S. senator, an African American U.S. senator from Mississippi, since Hiram Rhodes Revels in the 1870s. But if you look at this piece here from the Washington Post, The Mississippi Plan to keep blacks from voting in 1890. We came here to exclude the Negro. The Mississippi Plan to keep blacks from voting in 1890. We came here to exclude the Negro. And the man who presided over the convention, his name, he was a white county judge named Saladin Calhoun. And let me close out some of these tabs here. Let me go over to it right here. Here's what he said. He said, let's put it bluntly. He said, let's tell the truth about why they're here. Let's tell the truth if it bursts the bottom of the universe. He said, we came here to exclude the Negro. Nothing short of this will answer. They want to lock African Americans out of voting in Mississippi so they can fully take back control of the state legislatures, fully take back control of political power in Mississippi. The delegates of the state convention eventually adopt a literacy test and poll tax geared to suppress the black vote in a state with a black majority. African Americans were the majority of the population in Mississippi in 1890. The Mississippi Plan became the model throughout the South, part of a raft of racially oppressive Jim Crow laws that ended Reconstruction. But it became other Southern states are going to adopt similar laws to suppress the African American vote in those states also. And let's see, they have a picture here of Hiram Rhodes Rebels right here. U.S. Senator from Mississippi. He became a U.S. Senator in 1870. Okay, let's continue. How's everybody doing? How do you all like this type of information? The impact of the legislation was swift in Mississippi. By 1910, registered voters among African Americans dropped to 15% in Virginia. These Jim Crow era laws, okay? They're looking at different states. The impact of the legislation was swift. By 1910, registered voters among African Americans dropped to 15% in Virginia and under 2% in both Alabama and Mississippi. Okay, according to historian Donald G. Nyman in his book, Promises to Keep African Americans and the Constitutional Order, 1776 to the present. And this comes from the article from history.com, how Jim Crow era laws suppressed the African American vote for generations. How Jim Crow era laws suppressed the African American vote for generations. So we go through history. We deal with like the all-white primaries, like the all-white primaries of 1918 in Texas, and coming from things like the Texas State Constitution of 1876 that talked about the purity of the ballot box. But when literacy tests, poll taxes, grandfather clauses, and the many other ways to circumvent the 15th Amendment did not work to suppress African American voter turnout, white legislators in several southern states, including Texas, used all white primaries to all but eliminate African American voters' presence in the electoral process. And the reason why you have the attack on now, this whole thing about critical race theory, this is just something, the attack on critical race theory being taught in schools is made up, because they don't teach critical race theory in K through 12 schools. Teaching about the history of slavery is not critical race theory. Critical race theory is a legal analysis. That's taught in law schools and graduate schools. It's taught at the college level and in law schools. They don't teach that in K through 12. Okay, so this whole fight over critical race theory is really made up and is pushed by Donald Trump. And pushed by Fox News and a lot of these Republican think tanks and things like this. Okay, but what they want to do is suppress the teaching of systemic racism. And what systemic racism is: suppress the teaching of slavery, etc., and everything dealing with race that they don't like. They're just putting it under the title of critical race theory. This is what conservatives are doing. Read this article here. This is from the New York Times. This is from May 20th, 2021. Texas pushes to obscure the state's history of slavery and racism. Texas pushes to obscure the state's history of slavery and racism. Texas is awash in bills aimed at fending off critical examinations of the state's past, because Texas becomes a state in the Union in 1845, and it comes into the Union as a slave-holding state. Okay, so whoever controls the teaching of the past will control the trajectory of the future. Whoever controls the teaching of the past will control the trajectory of the future. And not only are Republicans trying to control what can be taught in school and control the teaching of the history of what happened in the past, they're also trying to pass voter restriction bills to then suppress who can vote, to determine also the laws and policies that will be put in place that will determine the trajectory of the future as well. This is what's taking place right now. There was a big article from NBC News that dealt with critical race theory, the battle of critical race theory in school boards, and what's behind all of that. Okay, there's a 17-page article they had. We talked about this on our show. Critical race theory battle invades school boards with help from conservative groups. This whole effort is funded. Critical race theory battle invades school boards with help from conservative groups. In towns nationwide, well-connected conservative activists and Fox News have ramped up the tension in fights over race and equity in schools. Okay, all this is connected. The fear of the browning of America, the fear of white people becoming a minority population in this country by 2043. We just saw the results of the census, and white people had a negative birth rate. Well, the population of white people declined in this country for the first time since 1790, since the first census was taken. Their population dropped by 5.1 million, down to about 197 million. Okay, and they dropped below 60% of the U.S. population for the first time since 1790. First time since the census was taken. Okay, so read this article here, and it goes through what's behind all of this, and it talks about there's 165 groups. Conflicts like this are playing out in cities and towns across the country amid the rise of at least 165 local and national groups that aim to disrupt lessons on race and gender, according to an NBC News analysis of media reports and organizations' promotional materials. Reinforced by conservative think tanks, law firms, and active parents, these groups have found allies and families frustrated over COVID-19 restrictions in schools, and have weaponized the right's opposition to critical race theory, turning it into a political rallying point to galvanize people, to get them to come out and vote in 2022 midterm elections, to galvanize people, to galvanize Republicans to take over local school boards. And this is seen as a way to gain political power from the grassroots up. This is something that Steve Bannon, who was advisor to Trump in the Trump administration, this is something that Steve Bannon talked about on his podcast some months ago. It's been downloaded by millions of people, and they're acting on this. Okay, so all white primaries as well. Now, after a white election official blocked an African-American man named Lonnie E. Smith the right to vote in the 1940 Texas Democratic Party, the NAACP's Thurgood Marshall and William H. Hastie challenged the case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. In 1944, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Smith versus Allwright that the Texas white primary system was unconstitutional. The Texas white primary system was unconstitutional. We see the all-white primaries in 1918 in Texas. And there was a segment from the Rachel Maddow show. What was this? This was May 7th, 2021. And she talked about the history of Texas and the all-white primaries. And they talked about the all-white primary of 1918 and how African-American women were blocked from voting in 1918. So Christia Adair was trying to vote in 1918 in Texas, in the Texas primary. And she said, and she was blocked from voting. And she said, and the report said, so finally one woman, a Miss Simmons, said, it was Miss Simmons trying to vote, I should say. Finally, one woman, a Miss Simmons, said, quote, are you saying that we can't vote because we're Negroes? Because we're Negroes? And he said, yes, Negroes don't vote in primary in Texas. She says, so that hurt our hearts real bad. Okay, this is a whole story. This is from May 7th, 2021. And it deals with Texas state constitution, Texas state laws, and the all-white primaries. Let me see. This was another piece from that. Let me see. What is this here? This one right here. This showed women who were trying to vote in Texas in 1918, and they were blocked from voting. Because this was before the 19th Amendment of 1920 as well, that guaranteed the right to vote to women, but it excluded a lot of African American. A lot of African American women in the South were not allowed to vote. All right. So this is just a sample of some of the information we deal with. We deal with the Compromise of 1877 in the Reconstruction, the Great Migration, 1915 and 1970, and 6 million African Americans migrating from the South up north and out west. We deal with the Red Summer 1919, the rise of the Ku Klux Klan because of the movie The Birth of a Nation in 1915. We go through, there were World War I, World War II. We talk about people like William Monroe Trotter and Charlotta Bass, who protested against the movie The Birth of a Nation, the organized protests against this. Oscar Micheaux, who was making films in 1920s and 30s and 40s. He directed and produced 44 films as well. And we were making movies to fight back against negative stereotypical images in the early 1900s. We look at the Red Summer 1919, where you had over 25 major race riots in this country. The year after World War I ends also. We go through World War II and the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power movement as well. Okay, so this is from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement to Black Power, 1865 to 1968. All right, this is a new 10-week online course we have starting up on Saturday, September 11th. We do the class live. It's going to be 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We do the class live. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch it over and over again. If you go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and scroll down the page, you see the information for the online course. It's on sale right now. It's regularly $130. It's on sale $70 until Saturday, September 11th. Click right here on register here. It takes you to the next page and just click on enroll. As soon as you're enrolled, there's bonus content. You can start watching. You can join us in class on Saturday, September 11th. And all the sessions are recorded also. So if you missed the class, you can go back and watch it anytime. Even a year from now, after, once the class is over with, you still have access to the content. You can go back and watch it. All right. So we'll post a link here. Also, you can register for the course. Hopefully you all learned something from this presentation. Hopefully you like this type of information. And if you want to support the African History Network, you can do so through Cash App, $ the AHN Show, through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. This helps us to broadcast the radio show. We're on 6 days a week, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight, and Sundays 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And there's information about the radio show on our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, as well. All right. You can also listen to audio podcasts of our shows. Also, wherever you get your audio podcast from, just search for the African History Network Show, the African History Network Show. We're on iHeartRadio, Castbox, FM Player, Blog Talk Radio. Just search for the African History Network Show. And at our website, we have information there on the homepage dealing with the radio show also. Let's see here. Right here. In times of the show, etc. And just click here to listen to audio podcasts. All right, look, we have to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. And we'll talk to you next time. Peace.